Hello and welcome to the True Hope Cast podcast, where we take a deep dive into mental health's many physiological and psychological aspects. This is the show for you if you're looking for information, knowledge, motivation and solutions, and that's what we are all about here at True Hope Canada. And True Hope Canada is a mind and body-based supplement company dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. For more information about us, you can visit truehopecanada.com. Today I welcome Dr. Emilie Wilson to the podcast. Now, Dr. Wilson is a naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, author and new mother. Her clinical background is in women's cardiometabolic and hormone health. After a traumatic childbirth in late 2022, she entered a very difficult postpartum time, including struggles with postpartum depression and anxiety. She knew that if she could struggle so much as a naturopathic doctor, then too many other parents were suffering as well. So she wrote a book to guide expecting parents to create their postpartum self-care plan in pregnancy to set them up for the best possible postpartum experience. Today, we're going to be discussing hormone health and pregnancy, as well as postpartum depression. Enjoy the show. Okay, Dr. Emilie, welcome to True Hope Cast. Thank you so much for being with me, with being with us today. How are you? What is going well?
Thank you so much for having me. I am doing really well. I'm so excited to be here because I am a new mom, as well as a doctor and an acupuncturist, and it changed my life, not only because I became a mom, but also because it gave me a whole new sense of purpose and lit me up in a whole new way to help women. And I am so excited to be able to share that. So thank you for, again, having me.
Beautiful. Well, we're going to be discussing hormone health in pregnancy and in postpartum today. But before we do that, can you maybe give us a little bit more of an intro of like who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Dr. Emilie Wilson. I'm a naturopathic doctor and an acupuncturist in Arizona. I've had so many evolutions in my career, and I started off studying and practicing in the mental health sphere. And then I moved more into mental health for women. And then that sort of became more broadly addressing women's health and women's hormones, because women's hormones are so essential for us in our health, and then also in our experience of mental health and who we are as people. I also am a type A person. And so in my journey of going through medical school and then starting a practice and, living my life and having to work other jobs, I ended up slowly but surely gaining a lot of weight. And that culminated in a bit of a personal crisis where I had to ask myself, what is going on here where I'm helping all of these women get better? Their hormones are regulating, they're losing weight, they're sleeping well, they look great. And I am for some reason going in the opposite direction. And that question was one of the profound shifts in my career, because it made me realize, the reason they're doing this, that they're doing so well, is because they have already committed to themselves. They have dedicated the time to come and see me. They have dedicated the financial resources to come and see me. They have dedicated their attention to following a prescripted plan, and it's working. I, on the other hand, was making my job more important than my own health. And so I was skipping the workouts. I was staying up late. I was overstressed, and I was managing it with, enjoying a glass of wine or two a lot of the time. And I was eating food that I probably shouldn't have been eating. And so when I realized that I needed to prioritize my self-worth the way that my patients were, everything started to change. And so that was a profound eye-opener for me. As women, we need to focus on our self-worth.
I think what you just described there, I think that actually happens with quite a lot of good practitioners, because when you are in the space with a client or a patient one-on-one, you're there for them, you're listening for them, you are being present with them, and all of your energy, all of your focus is towards those individuals. So yeah, it could be from an outside perspective, be like, if you give this advice at 5 times a day, why you're not taking it yourself? But you're not really internalizing that information. You're providing it, you're giving it in a very external manner. So I totally understand where you come from. And then I think for a lot of people, inevitably at some point it's like, this is, I just need to start listening to my own advice and taking that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I think as maybe as a man, you know, maybe more men relate to this than I am aware of. But I can say that for women, a lot of us get used to the idea of saying, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. You know what? I knew I committed to exercising today, but tomorrow I'll do it for sure. Tomorrow I'll go, you know, grocery shopping. I'll shop the perimeter, you know, tomorrow I'll do this. And that becomes our daily mantra. And that for me was my kind of my first big career wake-up call. And then it stimulated my journey of losing 40 pounds, which got me into really kind of helping women do the same thing. How do you reclaim your hormone and cardiometabolic health? And so that's where I was professionally when I got pregnant, and had a beautiful pregnancy, felt great the whole time. But then this was in October of 2022, I gave birth to my daughter and experienced a very traumatic home birth. And that sent me into a very difficult postpartum time. And one of the things that saved my life during that time, and I'm very open about that, but one of the things that saved my life was starting to dive into the research on what's going on postpartum and how can we help women have a better postpartum experience. And the long and short of it is, you know, the sooner we can help women prepare for postpartum and pregnancy, the more likely they are to set themselves up for a better postpartum.
Interesting. That's really cool. Yeah, I think that so I've got two kids, they're 3 and 5, and the first one was quite traumatic. The second one was horrifically traumatic. And just as like the male, as the kind of the caregiver, I was just trying to be there for my wife. But like for my wife, especially with the second, I think that I think as a partnership anyway, you have this idea of what birth is going to be, especially with your first kid, when you see childbirth in Hollywood and it takes like 3 minutes and it's super easy and it's all good. You obviously create this idea in your head, you read the books, you talk to people, and like, you know, a lot of people have like kind of seemingly very easy births, but probably a lot of people don't talk about like the really traumatic ones, and how you are gearing yourself up for a long period of time, like 7 to 9 months of this idea of how this is going to go. And then when something like traumatic happens within that, you know, where there's obviously so much going on, it's wild, whether you're at the hospital, whether you're at home, and something like massively changes that image that you've created for yourself over months and months and months and months. It's a long period of time to create this like image in your mind. And then you have this huge hormonal and emotional outburst and journey that you're not expecting. And I think the aftermath of that, especially for the mother, is wildly under talked about. And I don't know how you can begin to prepare somebody for it not going like ideally. I don't know if you can talk to that, but obviously you're working a lot and you've been inspired from your own journey to, you know, support women and parents to deal with that huge stressful emotional shift that happens. It ends up kind of like staying within the body for long periods of time and can take a long period of time to like work through.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up too, because I think that, you know, one of the ways that I'm interpreting what you just said is that we don't talk about the trauma or the scary things that can happen for women in birth, or even, you know, as the partner there in the room or there with her. I'm sure you went through your own experiences as well. And we don't, as a culture, tend to share that because I think we're kind of afraid of making other people afraid. We don't want to put bad thoughts into other people's heads.
Yeah.
And I think that there's such a balance there. And it's an opportunity for us as a culture to start to understand the experience of childbirth a little bit better. Medically, it is a very big deal. And I didn't realize that as a doctor going into it. I thought, oh, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. You know, I was concerned about postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, but I thought, you know, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. which unfortunately a lot of women have that mindset going into pregnancy. I'll worry about postpartum when it's right here with me.
Sure.
And yeah, and I wish that we could change the narrative a little bit and start to help women understand from the research what is going to help them have a better postpartum. And I think that by sharing our birth stories as honestly as possible, that's a way to kind of open up the door. I thought a lot. So I wrote a whole book about this, and I thought a lot in writing about how much of my experience do I want to share in the book, because I don't want to be I don't want to seem like I'm being an alarmist or scare people.
Right.
But I want people to know that for me as a doctor, I went into this very unprepared, and if I could have done it again, here's what I would do instead. And so I think there's a lot of value for us in just sharing our stories, because it opens up the door and it allows women to think, if things don't go according to my birth plan, what do I want to happen instead? What's the next best option?
Yeah, I think when you think about it, like taking a big step back, looking at the whole picture, I think that the preparation thing is absolutely key. And if you were to like run a marathon, you wouldn't just like go do it and like expect to not have like significant soreness and distress within your body. Like it's a massively physically, emotionally stressful time to like get that baby out of you. It's like absolutely intense and wild, even just as like the father being there and watching my partner, my wife, going through this unbelievable ordeal, like making noises that I've never heard another human being make before. It's like it's out of the ordinary. It's very unfamiliar. It's very unusual. And I guess you can't like put yourself in that unless you've been in the room with somebody giving birth before. But preparation in regards to, feeling depressed, anxious, stressed after something like that, I think it only goes to serve your future self to prepare yourself for that. And whether that's in the shape of self therapies that you can do to like help you get through that, having a support system, having a community, educating yourself previously to like what are the possibilities, listening to other people's birth stories. I think that's super valuable. Even like just the idea, like, we're a nutritional based supplement company here, and we have amazing protocols for so many things hormone related. And it would make sense, like if you were about to give birth and your body was about to manufacture these amazing amounts of phenomenal chemicals that are going to make this baby come out of you and actually help you deal with that, with some of the pain and getting the baby out, contractions, is all biochemical. Your body needs necessary ingredients to make those chemicals happen. They need to be in abundance and they need to be sufficient and available. So it just makes sense for me as a nutritionist that you would need to obviously have the right nutrition, not like 3 days before you're about to give birth, but your body needs to be very used to that quality nutrition coming into the body, so your body is used to absorbing it and assimilating it on a frequent basis. Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense to me that you would want to make those necessary preparations, not just for birth, but for the inevitable, like, I don't want to use the word crash, but like your body is in like significant, serious, like work, let's go mode during like childbirth. And it has to have this like massive down regulation of this, like all these things it needs to make to get the body out of there. And it's like, I don't know, I've not read many books or listened to many podcasts or seen it in any movies where they talk about preparing for that inevitable biochemical shift that happens.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great way to think about this, Simon, because pregnancy really is preparation for everything that's going to come next, right? And there are so many books out there on how to have a healthy pregnancy that when I started to write a book, I was writing for pregnancy, and then I had my baby and I realized, no, this needs to be a postpartum book, because this is the area that we need the most help with. And you're right, we do go through this massive crash. So in pregnancy, you know, our hormone levels build and build and build. And depending on the woman, that can be really good or really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So like myself, for example, I had a great pregnancy. I felt wonderful. My skin looked great. My hair looked great. I slept well, for the most part.
Yeah.
But then it was with the hormone crash and the massive nutrient loss that I had. I was sent into really a downward spiral, and I did not do well with that. And so I love the way that you describe pregnancy as sort of this long-term preparation for the marathon that's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this long event of not just childbirth, but then figuring out how to be a mom to this brand new creature, this brand new baby that's here. And so when I was writing the book is called Post, The Essential Guide to Creating Your Postpartum Self-Care Plan in Pregnancy, because it's addressing exactly what you're talking about. We need to know how to prepare ourselves in pregnancy for a better postpartum, which, by the way, is also going to give you a better pregnancy.
Yeah.
But there are a few key areas, and you've already mentioned one. I mean, it's the first one I talk about. It's diet and nutrition. And so we have research-based, we have nutritional needs in pregnancy and postpartum, and they're a bit different according to the research. And so figuring out how to kind of stagger and structure that easily in pregnancy is going to help with postpartum when you don't have the time or the mental capacity for that. But yeah, nutrition and hydration is a massive one. And then we have some others that just make sense. So there's exercise is another massive piece here. Sleep, of course, is massive. It's a lot easier before the baby comes. So thinking about it before the baby comes is really important. Stress management. And then, of course, support, which you also mentioned. And support for me means getting your entire medical team on board. So knowing who are the members of your medical team and who to call if there's an issue. And then it's your support people. So I always say, you know, somebody like the partner. So in your family, you might be, maybe you were like your wife's medical advocate in the room. If there was, you know, if she needed somebody to speak up for her and she couldn't, you were that person. You had that opportunity to stand and be there for her. And I think, you know, for women, having those conversations with our partners before the baby comes about what do we want, what happened, you know, what do we do if things don't go the way we're hoping they go?
Yeah.
Super important.
Yeah, because you can imagine, like, if things aren't going the way you're expecting them to and there's no plan, just think about the spiralation of thoughts that would happen to somebody, like, you know, trying to give birth, and like things are happening and decisions need to be made, the extra stress that goes along with that. Like, again, simple preparation, and I'm sure there are lots of resources that people can actually like do to like even like checklist things off to make sure that, you know, things are in preparation, and whether it's your partner or your midwife, but to have everyone, as you say, like on board in regards to what's going on, just so they know that if there are deviations to the plan, we know what those deviations are. We're not like shocking anybody. We're not like freaking people out, and we're not going to have like aftermath of like, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. Like, why didn't we do that? But it's like, it's in the moment. It's like incredibly like stressful, amazing, beautiful thing. But it's also like things can change and things can happen really fast. And the more you're prepared for that, like, I don't think you can be 100% prepared for anything in life, but something like that, like the more preparation you have, the better.
Yeah, 1000%. And again, I think it's this fine line, this fine balance between, you know, we never want people to think about what the scary things that might happen to the point where they actually get really upset or terrified or worried about this, because that's why we live in this beautiful world that has access to both like midwifery and really wonderful state-of-the-art Western medical care. And so we have a lot of options. But we need to know what our options are when we're going into the experience of giving birth, and, you know, when we might deviate from what our hopes are,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to it just feels appropriate. I'd like to share a little bit about like my birth story with my second kid. So his name's Wyatt, but he came out 10.5 pounds on my quite small wife. And he has a rare genetic condition, which we didn't know about until a couple of days after he was born. So he came out absolutely massive, but he also came out like blue and not breathing. So it was like unbelievably stressful. This is all at home with my two incredible midwives. But the first 4 hours of the labor were just like my wife was in absolute heaven. Like she had like the light coming through the front room in the pool. Everything was going wonderful. And then it just like, as soon as that baby started to come out, everything was just went to hell so quick. But I personally had like so much trust and faith in these midwives that were here, that we'd seen multiple times before the birth. We had a plan, everything like that. And that was out without question. I would have I was freaking out, but I would have been freaking out to the point of not being useful whatsoever. And I ended up being quite useful like in that moment for my wife and for my son. So yeah, even just like the preparation of like knowing who's going to be there, who's in the room, and just like knowing who they are a little bit, knowing their name, being with them in like a room for some sessions where you start to feel an energy, you start to feel comfortable with that individual, like significantly easier than just like having a stranger coming in to kind of like deal with that type of thing. It just eased everything in a horrifically wild, stressful situation anyway. So yeah, super thankful that we were able to like have the opportunity to get to know our midwives a little bit and have that super team available to us, because yeah, I don't know how, it was stressful afterwards, but it would have been a lot worse. Like I think the prolongedness of that post period would have been significant if not for like what we'd done in preparation.
Yeah. And I think too, it really does come down to support being one of the most important pieces of the puzzle here. So like having that faith in your medical team is everything. Did you use a doula?
We didn't have we did. We had my wife's auntie. She was a doula there as well. So like, yeah, we had a doula, we had two midwives, we had myself and my mother-in-law. There's an amazing team around us. And yeah, it was just like so good to have strong, experienced women in that environment, if I'm being honest with you. I don't know, it wouldn't have been any better with a bunch of men. I don't think. It was just great to have those were women who've like, I think there was like probably 6 or 7 kids between them all. They'd obviously seen a lot of things, but then they were just, they were extremely close family members as well. So that bond, that trust that these individuals can like kind of take care of my wife and take care of me in that moment, like it was just wonderful. Even like when we had to go to the hospital with my wife and my son, and we 3 of us went in 2 ambulances, not to have to worry about like the house and like the stuff that everything that had happened. Like you don't have to worry about that because like all these people were there like there to take care of us.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was huge.
It makes a difference. It makes a really big difference.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, even if you've got like other kids, like I had a 2-year-old at the time as well, like with a friend of mine, and like I absolutely knew that child would be taken care of for 4 hours, if it was just 4 hours or if it was 48 hours that we needed them, just to like not to have that extra worry or concern in my mind. It's not like, putting the garbage out. It's like looking after like a human being, but it's great to know that you've got these people in your corner. And I think a lot of people, if they reach out, can create a really strong support system that's going to like get them through so much of, pregnancy, birth, and everything after.
Yeah. And that's so, I think that this is one of the pieces that, again, for women to come back to this idea, I'll speak for myself. I have never been very good at asking for help from other people. And one of the things that I learned firsthand was, no, I actually do have to be asking for help in my postpartum experience. And also, how would everything have looked different if I had asked for more help and support before my baby came?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big piece of creating your self-care plan too, is just building the muscle of asking for support and knowing, for example, when you think about who's going to be in the delivery room that day with you, is it somebody who can support you? Or is it somebody who might freak out and need your support, which you're not going to be able to give at that time? And I mean, it sounds funny, but my midwife was telling me horror stories before my daughter was born about having like these partners in the room who just like shouldn't have been in the room.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And my daughter's dad, he and I both mutually decided long before she came that he wasn't going to be in the room because we both knew it wasn't going to be for the best. So she was glad for that. But
yeah, that's something you have to consider, something you have to anticipate, because like that, I don't know, one person that might faint and like crack their head open, like there's doctors and nurses in the room for sure, but they shouldn't be attending concussions. They should be attending other things.
And I actually just heard a story about that. This woman had an emergency C-section and her partner fell backwards against the wall in the room and, I know, luckily he was fine, thank God, but that happens. Mm-hmm. And so how can we keep that from happening as much as possible? How can we set people up for the best birth experience possible and the best postpartum possible too? Because again, as you mentioned, there's this whole hormonal roller coaster that happens for the woman that it all happens on the inside and nobody really knows it or sees it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to touch on that because so when I studied nutrition, we had this amazing, huge, I think it was probably 3 different classes in 3 different semesters where we spoke about female hormone health, and the male hormone health took an hour and the female hormone health took almost a year to like cover extensively, to the point where we were like really covering our bases. And I just remember this fluctuation chart of like a standard cycle and the ups and downs and like the different hormones involved in having the ability to release an egg, house it, and then do that all over again. Like, it's unbelievably complex and complicated. And I think we'll talk about this now, but like, we're probably doing a poor job in preparing men and women to understand how complex that is and how many things like outside of us, like whether it comes to like seed oils, processed sugar, stress, all these things that significantly damage your ability to manufacture these hormones and keep them in check, and how we have to worry about like xenoestrogens and all these things that mimic these hormones that cause huge problems for people. Like, I think that if we were to have the better education, like in like the beginning of high school about these things, and not just for like women do women's health and men do men's health, but to bring that in, because I was 30 years old when I really learned about this and I was like super fascinated by it because it was so complex. I think we would serve everybody if everyone was a little bit more understandable about like the complexities of the female hormone health system.
Oh, I love what you're saying. And I actually am getting goosebumps because for me, this is how we change the world, right? Mm-hmm. We live in a culture that values speed and flavor and convenience over whole foods and slowing down and really nourishing and resting. And those all wreak havoc on our hormone system. And again, just to speak to the female hormonal system, when we live in a world where we're under constant stress, we are eating highly processed foods with artificial colors, flavors, chemicals, those hydrogenated, trans fat filled processed oils. And then all these other toxins to which we're exposed on a daily basis. We set ourselves up for massive hormone disharmony. And we see evidence of that all the time. Obesity numbers are rising. Infertility rates are rising. Menstrual irregularities and problems are on the rise. PCOS is on the rise. Everything is looking like it's reaching a crescendo. Mm-hmm. And I think that all we have to do is slow down for a second and ask ourselves if we're really living the way that we want to live. Again, it comes back to this foundational message of self-worth. Like, if I were to choose myself today, how would I live my life? Would I still pick up that ding dong and eat it with my convenience food, my convenience store coffee?
Mm-hmm.
Would I gulp it down on my way to work, sitting in traffic? Would I let myself get stressed out by my inbox? I that's not how I want to live my life, and I don't think that's how most people want to live their lives. So
yeah, you're spot on. And I always think, I try and come back to the idea of like thinking about us in like communities of 20 people, 50 people, 100 people living underneath the stars, and how, our biology is absolutely no different, but our environment certainly is. But like, we can absolutely get back to the understanding that, it might not be possible to like take days and days off during like a menstrual cycle, but you've just certainly got the ability to be able to like take care of yourself differently once you know what's going on for you and your body. And like, yeah, I always think back to like, what would our ancestors be doing in these situations? And it's always fundamental. It's all about nutrition and rest and movement and all these like things. I think everyone kind of like knows that is beneficial for us. But yeah, with the complexities of like the hormonal system, and we see so many different hormonal disorders that often get like, in this like reductionist manner, like separated to be like very, very different. Like you would see someone different for PCOS, you see someone else for like, other hormonal conditions, rather than like sitting back and recognizing that, your hormonal system, it's absolutely, it's very, very complex, but it's a symphony. It's a symphony that needs attention and awareness. And like, if there's an issue with one part of it that comes all the way down, then there's going to be like this poor backfeed loop that we're going to see issues with. And it's like, just simple understanding of that is without question how we start to get people a lot healthier, because there's so much in our environment that's like completely destroying hormonal health, fertility, etc.
Mm-hmm. And I love this vision that you kind of created for me a little bit earlier, of these communities of people living under the stars, right? Living outside. And our hormones do very much, they cycle alongside these cycles that are happening in nature all the time. These daily cycles, these monthly cycles, these yearly cycles. And when we don't give ourselves the time and space to respect those cycles, things go wrong, right? When we keep pushing, when we live in a culture again where women, it's this bounce back from childbirth culture, where women are celebrated for getting their body back. They're celebrated for going back to work too soon. They're celebrated for, doing it all. When really what we have to do is return to this very ancient, longstanding tradition of allowing ourselves to be nurtured postpartum. And it's really, really hard for us as women. And I figure in this day and age, there is more than enough information out there. So I wrote this book because I said, I want to just give people one resource to find all of the information they need, because we're not lacking for information. We're lacking for the right information, maybe.
Yeah.
But here it is. If you're pregnant, or even if you're postpartum, or you know somebody who is, here's the information. And what we need more than anything is the opportunity to practice self-advocacy, to practice finding support and asking for support, and the opportunity to practice taking care of ourselves in a very deep way. Because as women, a lot of us we weren't taught that. We weren't raised that way. And so that's really kind of where I have started to focus my practice and transition my practice. And it's been absolutely amazing to see how these fundamental things are actually some of the most life-changing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, I don't know if it's natural, organic, but like, I feel that we were talking about it earlier about caregiving as a woman. And I think that so many women out there like are a lot less selfish than men are, and they want to care for others a lot more than they want to care for themselves. when I first started practicing nutrition, for some reason, every other client I got was like a 55-year-old woman whose family had now moved out, and I didn't know what to do with the energy that they had, because they were so used to taking care of the kids, taking care of the house, taking care of all of these things. And they never took care of themselves, or they said, oh, I'm sure they did, but like it was like fifth on the priority list. And then when I started to help these individuals, first of all, understand that, and that's okay. It's very important to be a caregiver, but like there has to be a point where you have to start putting that energy back in towards yourself, to start healing, to start recognizing the maybe the unhelpful patterns or the unhelpful habits. And it's a very powerful thing to become aware of. And I think that certainly has a part to play when people want to do something about their health. They want to be an advocate, and there's all this information out there, but it's like we need like bite-sized, easy steps to kind of like get there. Like whether that's just starting with a healthy breakfast, then it's like working on moving your body daily, and then you can like start building up all these things that are going to certainly benefit you. And then you've just got this absolute arsenal of all these things that you're doing for yourself, and you just start wrapping yourself in love and gratitude and hope and joy, and you pushing out anger and rage and panic and anxiety and depression, which carry a significantly different energetic frequency. And then you just start smiling more, and you start feeling better, and people start noticing that, and people probably want a little piece of that. And you can start thinking about, I don't know, more wild things like getting early morning light into your eyes, getting evening light into your eyes, and like looking up at the stars. Like we spoke about that earlier. I think that if we didn't have so much light pollution in towns and cities, and we were able to look up at the stars and see the cosmos and see the shooting stars and see all these amazing things, we would just like be in absolute awe constantly all the time about how like kind of meaningless we are in this incredible universe, and we would just walk around with more joy. That's a separate topic, but I think you know what I mean.
Absolutely. In fact, I love that topic, and I think it's totally relevant because it's life, right?
Yeah. So I think we agree that we're like, conventionally speaking, we're doing kind of a poor job in regards to like educating people about preparing for pregnancy, female hormone health. And, you know, we've got individuals like you are writing amazing books, but where do you think the massive shortcomings are with like our educational system, for example?
Whew, that's a good question. Again, I'll start with a story about my experience, because I think this is happening a lot. And I am a woman who attended all of my scheduled medical visits. A lot of women in pregnancy don't. And that's another massive problem. But, and I started out my pregnancy pretty healthy, and not every woman does. But one of the massive, this is an example of a massive shortcoming, that when I started to reflect on my experience after my daughter was born, I realized, and I had an OBGYN, and I also had a midwife. Not one of them asked me one question about how I wanted my postpartum experience to go, what I wanted it to look like, what would happen, what did I want to happen in the event that something might go sideways while my daughter was being born. You know, nobody talked to me about the actual steps that were needed to prepare myself for the day of her birth and what came next. And I think that that is just a massive example of this, the way that the current healthcare system is failing women. These conversations happen. They're not even conversations, they're experiences that happen for women behind closed doors because they've already given birth. They're not out there sharing their stories with the world because they're recovering. They're recovering from this massive crisis sometimes, or a massive event. They're also learning how to be a parent, maybe for the first time ever, or maybe how to parent a newborn with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 other kids. And they're quite often usually pretty lucky if they can figure out how to get at least one good meal in a day and a few hours of sleep while doing everything else. And that's not okay. We need to be having these conversations with women before the baby comes, so that she can start thinking about and envisioning what she wants her postpartum experience to look like. Because, I touched on this earlier, but the idea of stress and pressure and a fast-paced life, that has massive effects on our hormone health. And even in the absence of any outside stressor, a postpartum woman can expect that her hormones won't come back into that cyclical balance for 6 months, they usually say.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, and quite often, I think it takes a lot longer than that. And I say, give it a year. Just give yourself that time and space. And I talk to postpartum women who are so eager to get their hormones back in balance. They're so eager to lose the postpartum weight. And the kindest and most honest thing I can tell them is just be patient and practice these things.
Mm-hmm.
Practice the nutrition. Don't stress about not getting exercise 7 days a week. Instead, 1 day a week, find some time to exercise and then build on that. It's these small steps. It's taking those small steps to move forward to the life that you want, rather than being stuck where you are, worried about what you're not doing.
Yeah, I think for probably a lot of women, their past experience of making health changes is probably based around diet and weight loss. And those things are usually quite they're very acute, they're very large, they're very invasive in regards to someone's habitual routine. So I would guess, like a lot of people, like in that postpartum section where they want to get their health back to normal, they're probably going at it with the same level of intensity and expectation that they would with like a wild diet, which without question isn't the way to go, in regards to like something so wildly traumatic to the body and to the psychology as well. So yeah, having those like step-by-step guides and working on working out or just walking once a week, is anything that's a big win, rather than trying to do 5K every day, like setting yourself up for like massive disappointment and in future anxieties and depression. I think that's a really great way to look at it. And your piece talking about the kind of like educational system around like medicine and childbirth, I'm pretty convinced, I've not gone to medical school, but I'm pretty convinced that the information that they would learn is about getting that baby out safely as possible, keeping the mother alive, and then after that, there's probably not a whole lot of education wrapped around what you can do and what you can offer. And even if it's just as simple as doing those pregnancy visits with your doctor, just guiding people in the expectation of going to speak to somebody or going to these certain resources where you can begin to prepare themselves, because these doctors are so unbelievably overworked anyway. Yeah. You can't expect them to see every mother and every baby for weeks and months ahead. There's a lot of, if you're fortunate enough to have midwifery within your circles, then that's certainly an aspect that they can help contribute to. But again, having a baby, especially for the first time, is a very difficult thing to go through, and you want to trust as many people as you can. So you go and see the doctor, you've got that white coat syndrome thing, right? You trust that individual, and there's a big responsibility within that community of doctors to help guide people and educate people to the right resources. And even if it's just a word or a leaflet or a pamphlet or something that gives people direction towards thinking about 6 months, a year after birth, and what to expect, how you can help facilitate that massive fluctuation in hormone health differently. For me, it feels like a super simple thing to introduce, and it would be unbelievably effective.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just something to open the door, because too many of us are, as women, we don't know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. And we don't know that we actually should be thinking a lot more about this, especially if we are one of the women who has new medical conditions pop up in pregnancy, which happens all the time, or who go into pregnancy with medical conditions. Mm-hmm. Because that means you're probably going to take those with you in the postpartum period. And you're going to need even, an additional level of support there. And it has to start with the ways that you take care of yourself. Yeah. With the diet, the sleep, the exercise, the stress reduction, all of these very foundational pieces.
Yeah, we've had a few people on the podcast who have used our products either through the whole pregnancy or just postpartum. And what we found very similar to individuals that have like suffered with anxiety and depression for years and years, and they've tried all the drugs and they've not supported them in the long term. And then they want to move to a more natural food-based alternative. And these individuals for like 10 years, 20 years, they've primarily been like chronically nutrient deficient for so long, and their body has just struggled and struggled. And then they're taking a product that, you know, so bioavailable that actually gets through the blood-brain barrier to actually support neurological health, and their brains literally turn on, in some cases in days, and we see remarkable things. And we've seen the same with individuals through pregnancy and postpartum, that, you know, we spoke about that huge hormonal necessity during childbirth, and how we have a huge down regulation and crash of those hormones, that your body needs to build up its resources again. And you can do that with really poor, horrific supplements like from Costco, or you can do it with like really well-researched nutrition, and obviously diet and food and the right choices that you make as well come into it. But we found like, yeah, just like so many individuals are chronically nutrient deficient, and when you actually take a product and do some other things to, like, you know, boost your digestive and intestinal integrity, all these things can come full circle, and you can actually make significant changes quite quickly.
That's amazing. You know, one other piece of postpartum that I think is so interesting that people don't understand is this piece about brain health and the way that hormones and our brains interact with each other, and how in postpartum our brains go through almost a second adolescence. We know that in adolescence our brains become super neuroplastic because we're learning so much. That's why teenagers sleep all the time, because their brains are learning and changing and growing at such a rapid rate. What we're not talking enough about yet is that happens again postpartum. Because as moms, new moms, now we're programmed for survival of the species, right? So now our brain is constantly alert, trying to discern the cries of our babies, trying to scan the environment for safety, trying to reconfigure all of the relationships in our lives around this new person in our life. Yeah. So it's fascinating that we have this kind of second adolescence or second period of brain growth, massive brain growth postpartum, that requires a lot of additional nutrients and a lot of additional support to really kind of help us integrate all of this new information.
Yeah, that's a massive point. I think about the animal kingdom in those types of situations, where you can look at many other mammals like lionesses, for example, how they are on hyper alert for their babies for significant, literally for 24 hours. And, you know, their babies, their cubs are like good to go in a year and a half as, like, you know, massive adults that can take care of themselves. But for mothers of humans, like, humans are kind of like useless for a couple of years, and then they get a little bit more useful, and then they're kind of good to go, I guess, technically at 13, 14 or 15. But like, that's well over a decade that your mother is going to be super, super stressed out all of the time. I'm 40. I'm the youngest of 3 brothers. My mum still, like, massively, like, is always like concerned about me, about my well-being on definitely like a different level, but like, she's always thinking about it. You know, it's like, I'm her child, and I don't think that ever changes. But you can certainly do things and have practices in your life to help regulate that kind of that emotional sensitivity, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it starts with the foundations, and nutrition, hydration nutrition and hydration are essential.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, we've come to the end of our time here. I mean, I had a bunch more questions for you, but like, the best podcasts are the ones where we just like go off and it's all organic and natural. I don't even think I looked at my notes once, which is just fabulous. That's the way it should go. Can you let us know where people can connect with you, please?
Absolutely. So my website is a great place to start. It's www.sanoswellness.com, and that's S as in Sam, A, N as in Nancy, O, S as in Sam. And you can find me on Instagram too. I'm pretty active there. It's the same Instagram name, same handle, Sanos Wellness.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure that those links are in the show notes so people can navigate towards those easily, and they can check out your book there on the website, I guess, as well. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I learned more about hormone health for sure. I learned more about, it's just such a wild journey. And I think it's just as a father, as a man, having that understanding and respect and, is very, very important. And it just only just like helps to navigate us towards a better journey for getting women to have, and I don't want to say better births, but like being able to have better structures and support systems around them to deal with those things.
Yeah. And that's actually equally important for the men and the partners too. We've got to figure out how to support each other in that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really so much fun.
Beautiful. Well, that is it for this episode of True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. Again, all the links and everything you might need to connect with Dr. Emilie will be in the show notes, so you can find them there. But other than that, that is it for this week. We'll see you soon.